We are entering our top 10
Yeah,
here.
here is the top 10. I think we've gone through that. This is the halfway point, really.
Yeah. This is kind of for me where every album is just practically flawless.
Yeah, me
Is
too.
from
It's
here
like
on out.
near amazing for every album going forward.
Yep. And
Uh,
so
yeah.
our number nines and our number tens are really close, but my choice for number 10 was 2112, and your choice was
My choice for number 10 was Hold Your Fire. Hold Your Fire from 1987.
Mhm.
I really love this album. This is the one I think that continues to surprise me every time I hear it, and it gets better every time I hear it. Also, this really clicked big time for me about 6 or so years ago, and man, I just can't get enough every time I hear it. I love that artwork.
I
Also,
do
the
too.
juggling dude, it's
Yep.
great.
Yep. I used to
Um,
stare at that as a kid all the time. Just like, what's going on there?
yeah, me too. Like I in high school, I got the replay DVD set with the Exit Stage Left video, the Grace
All
Under
right.
Pressure, and then the Show of Hands, and that's
Yep.
also in the Show of Hands video.
That's right.
Yeah, that tour was smoking. Also, that was
One
my
of their
favorite
best.
part of that is the Show of Hands.
Yep. One of their
Uh,
best.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, this album, I think I can say a lot about this. So this may be one of the best Rush albums in terms of lyrics.
hmm
The lyrics are consistently incredible. Neil is firing on all cylinders with the writing here. It's just amazing and really impactful still today. His lyrics are kind of timeless.
hmm
One of my favorites in particular is the song "Open Secrets."
hmm
It's such a gorgeous song. I was looking out the window. I should have looked at your face
Should have looked
instead.
at your face instead.
It says so
Yeah.
much.
Does.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and the song Prime Mover has been stuck in my head like crazy the last 3 or 4 days.
That song really slaps.
So this album is very close for me in ranking, and it is my number. Wait a minute. No, it's not. I got confused again. It's number 8. It's number 8. So we continue to
Nice.
be like within 2 or 3 slots of one another. But what I wanted to point out about this is that Neil Peart talked about these two albums, this one and Power Windows, as being like a duology, a left and right, sort of in the same way that Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres was. And a lot of that has to do with the production of Peter Collins, who entered with the Power Windows album and continued to produce the band for this album, and then later on Test for Echo and Counterparts. But Neil says in Martin Popoff's book, Contents Under Pressure, that Power Windows is the extrovert album and Hold Your Fire is the introvert album. And I totally get that reading. He also says that if he were approaching Rush as a fan, this would have been one of his favorite albums, because there is so much deliciousness in the arrangements to dig into. There's constantly things that are surprising you. But for me, what stands out about this album is, like you said, the songwriting. And, sometimes there are Rush songs where the lyrics are just fantastic and the music is like, it's not quite as good as the lyrics. But I think for the most part, until you get to the last two songs, this album, the music and the lyrics really work well together. Let me just point to a song like Force 10, which is like, has the power to immediately get me hyped up. Time Stands Still is, such a, like, to me, this whole era was about, Rush had done progressive rock. They had done heavy metal. They had done hard rock. They experimented with reggae. And this was about all those influences coming together. And now it's synthesized and it's just Rush. And both this and Power Windows are like that. And we will talk more about Power Windows. I don't want to give away too much. But like you said, Open Secrets is great. Prime Mover is one that it's a sleeper. It'll sneak up on you. Lock and Key. But the one that stands out to me as being the absolute classic, aside from Force 10, is probably Mission. And this is like, hand in hand with my favorite Rush song of all time, which is Marathon, because both of these songs are kind of about the idea of I think they must have visited like a sports hall of fame or something like that, and then just been really inspired by the sacrifices that people have to make to be excellent at their careers. And you can certainly, you can very easily draw a parallel between, that sort of thing, the marathon or following the mission in one's heart, to being in a rock band and going out there and playing shows and paying your dues and being able to make music for people as a living. Like I think this is one of the quintessential Rush tracks, and it's one of those albums that I didn't used to like it because it was so different from what had come before, but now it's absolutely one of my favorites. And it just reveals so much of what I love about this band. Again, like Turn the Page, that's another outstanding track. It's not until you get to the last two, the Tyshawn and the High Water, that it kind of feels like, well, that's good, but it's not Rush. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it doesn't
that's
fit.
the reason why it's as low as it is. Because quite honestly, like the songwriting on this album is like the highlight. And I would, if it wasn't for Tyshawn and High Water, this would be way higher on my ranking. Like maybe in the top 5 even.
Yeah,
but,
same here.
High Water is, I think, one of the most baffling and forgettable closers in the catalog. I don't know what it is about it, but it is so unmemorable. Mm-hmm. Tyshawn I kind of like, but it just doesn't work. I know the band really hates it. Also, it's like it's an experiment, but it doesn't quite work.
Right.
But, everything else is just so amazing. I also really want to point out how important Second Nature is.
Mm-hmm.
Also, that is an incredibly gorgeous song, especially to me. It has like some of the most potent and important lyrics in the catalog, too. It's a really amazing song about climate impact. And also fighting the powers that be.
That's right.
Generally.
Yeah.
A lot of my favorite music envelops this like both happy yet sad feeling, and I think Second Nature also captures that. And it's one of my favorite Rush songs, just like Mission is also.
Yeah, and this one's almost like a precursor to a song like Red Tide.
It is,
on Presto. But I love this this line: "We fight the fire while we're feeding the flames."
Yeah.
That's just so insightful.
Yeah, it's so great. Like, the album's full of amazing lines like that. Love this record. This needs more. This is another one of those Rush albums that needs more people to give it a chance because
I agree.
So dang terrific.
Yeah, and I think that there's like two kinds of Rush classics. There's the classics that are embraced by the wider public, like say Moving Pictures, and then there's the classics that are fan favorites. And I think Power Windows and Hold Your Fire kind of fit more into that latter category where the believers know that these albums are great.
Yeah.
The faithful know that they're amazing.
And this is also an amazing record for Geddy Lee in particular too. His bass parts on this are stupendous.
Yes.
Like Time Stands Still, the song is terrific and I think is some of Neil's best drum parts. It's just perfectly complements the song. It's unbelievable. Like beautiful drum parts. It's so musical.
Well, it's a very important song for me in the same way that Mission is, because I have always been obsessed by the idea of capturing moments. And that's why I love the recorded arts. Because I've always wanted to capture a moment and live in it, at will, to go back to it. And so that's why I loved recording music. That's why I love photography. That's why I love film. And so this song, that sentiment, Time Stands Still, I'm not looking back, but I want to look around me now. The idea that time is constantly marching forward, and we should all just take a moment and live in the moment, and look around and capture this. Remember it. Yeah, I love it, and I think Geddy's singing is at its best.
Oh yeah,
for the next string of albums, like from here through probably maybe Vapor Trails, like his singing is at its absolute best.
Yeah, this is a zenith for sure.
That's the word.
Zenith, yeah.
Zenith.
Also, a good Rush title if there was one.
Yes.
Give it another spin, y'all. It's so great.
Hey.
Number nine.
We always do that.
Yes, we have to.
So my number 9 is Hemispheres.
Yes.
And this is like we're so close for a lot of these. But your number 9 is...
My number 9 is 2112. one of their, in my opinion, one of their quintessential albums.
Yes.
This is probably the earliest of the core collection, I guess you would call it, TM of the Rush catalog. I haven't, until our binge here, I haven't heard the album in full in many years for whatever reason. I don't know. I tend in the past couple years gravitate towards the 80s and 90s Rush because that's now my favorite Rush. But this was so much fun on a revisit. 2112 is for me the best epic Rush piece. It's really well constructed. All the movements are great. They're cohesive. The story's cohesive. The playing kicks butt. It's just got it all. It's one of their best pieces, period. And side 2 also has fire. A lot more fire than I remembered, quite frankly. Side 2 is a big surprise for me.
And it also has kimonos.
It does have kimonos, yes. And that is a big one, too.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, like even something that's quote unquote could be viewed as like a silly song, like a Passage to Bangkok is essentially about weed, and The Twilight Zone is about a TV show. They work really well, and they both have killer guitar solos in them. Like Alex is on fire. I love it. And Lessons is like Making Memories but better from Fly By Night. And you get Something for Nothing, which is another quintessential closing song. I like Tears also, but it's definitely my least favorite song on here. That song really surprises me because it's so unlike anything else. It sounds like it's off of King Crimson's In the Wake of Poseidon.
It does, yes. And even like when I noticed on this most recent listen that even Neil's drumming is like, oh man, the drummer's name, it's escaping me right now. Michael Giles, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Because he only plays on the choruses, I think. He sits out on the verses.
Yeah, there's no
drums. He just comes in. And there's just like a little bit of a like a little drag of the snare that's just right out of Michael Giles playing. It's really something special in their catalog, I think. This was the protest album. This was an act of defiance.
Yes.
Because they had presented Caress of Steel to their label and fans, and they got a lot of, no, none of this. We don't want this. We want you to conform. And I feel like there are parallels between that presentation to the song presentation, where it's set in a dystopian future. I don't know if it's this world or another world, but essentially a man has found a guitar in a cave, and he presents it to the elders and says, look at this amazing thing that I found. Look what wonderful gift to humanity that this is. And they say, no, that's nothing new to us. It's just a waste of time. We don't have any need for that. Get rid of it. Conform. Go back to what, normal things. And, you can hear them raging against that. That mediocrity throughout this album, and that's a lot of what fuels this little rock opera suite. And the other thing to mention is that classical music is a big part of this. This is the beginnings to me of a 3-piece orchestra. Like Rush is a 3-piece orchestra, and that is a motif that carries on through every single album, even up through Clockwork Angels, where they have a literal orchestra, even on Power Windows, where they have a literal orchestra and choir backing them up on a few songs. But here it's just them, and it's like I think it's genius, the idea of taking little bits and pieces from each of the parts of the suite and then tying them together to make an overture. And then somebody says, oh, it's like the 1812 overture. And so we get a quote from the 1812 overture, even with the cannons and stuff. Like, it's just really, really smart, rock orchestra music. And great histrionic vocals that once again put me in mind of Peter Hamill and the Pond Hearts album. And then when you get to side 2, like you said, this was side 2, I think, was the part that surprised me the most at how much I enjoyed it. Passage to Bangkok, I think, is a wonderful song. And it comes to life on Exit Stage Left, especially. But I love the imagery of, stopping at all the little important cannabis ports along the way to refuel. And perhaps they refueled a few times too many on the previous album, Caress of Steel.
Yes, they're recanting their travels.
Yeah, yes, they're recounting the travels of Caressive Steel era. But the Twilight Zone, here's a song that's about pop culture. This was their favorite show, and this was a show that each one of them grew up watching. And then when they were on tour together, they would watch it together in hotel rooms and on the bus. And it was like kind of an inside joke among the band. Whenever something really weird or unfortunate or what have you would happen while they were on tour, they would say, well, this must be written by Rod Serling. This is something straight out of the Twilight Zone. And then, like you said, Lessons is a very strong track. I think this is an Alex Lifeson penned music and lyrics. Tears is Geddy Lee. That's his song, both music and lyrics. And then, like you said, Something for Nothing, which does borderline on preachy, but it's still a good sentiment.
Yes.
You gotta fight for your freedom. And I just, yeah, I love it. And this whole album, I think, is about fighting for freedom, because how many times in history can you think of where a band defied the record label and doubled down on their belief system and won their freedom out of it? Because from this album forward, they could do whatever they want. They had no interference.
Yeah, this was their breakout, more or less.
Yeah. And that's why it's maybe one of the most important Rush albums, and maybe it should be higher on our lists than what it is. But in terms of favorites, like, I just feel like there's ones I like a little bit better or a little bit more consistent.
Yeah.
Like, this opened the door to so many wonderful things. But it definitely does need to be acknowledged what an incredible record this is.
Yes. And also, I should note too, for personally, the discovery and presentation movements are two of my favorite things in the whole catalog. Just amazing. And the version of 2112 on different stages, the live album, is the best one. It is.
Yeah, it is. And I actually like, there's a version from Toronto from that tour that I like just a little bit better.
Oh, really?
There's video of it on YouTube. You can check it out. But when they do grand finale, it must have been because they were playing for a home crowd, but they kick up the tempo and it sounds like avant-garde.
Oh, that's awesome.
like it sounds like they could have been on Cuneiform Records.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
and it's just like, my God, what an onslaught. But if you ever have a chance, you should definitely check that out. But I was going to mention that I'm also a big fan of Soliloquy when you talk about the histrionic side of Rush. I really like that. And then,
it is kind of Vandegraaff, isn't it? It is. I didn't put that together, but it really is a lot like Hamill.
Mm-hmm. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to say about 2112?
Where does this album rank for you? Because I think we've been doing, I say where it is, and then you say where it is.
Yes, I did not say
2112 on yours.
It's number 10 for me, so it just cracks my top 10.
Great. We've like flip-flopped a little.
Yeah, but we're still like, I think there's only one album that isn't consistent among our top 10. And it'll be really interesting to talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, it's one that I'm very excited to talk about because it's one that I've championed for a long time.
My number 8 is Hold Your Fire, which we already talked about that. That might be controversial that I say that I prefer Hold Your Fire to 2112 and Hemispheres. I hope you can see the spine. I actually listened to all three of those records in a row one day, and it shocked me how much I enjoyed Hold Your Fire. And it was right, like I played 2112 right before that, and I was like, oh my goodness.
I almost put Hold Your Fire above both of those, just like you did, and maybe even the next one, but I decided not because I think the last two tracks on that album weigh it down a little bit for me. Like if it didn't have those last two tracks, it would be in the top 5 without question. My
reasoning for ranking Hold Your Fire above those two is that it's a 50-minute album, and those two tracks only account for 10 minutes of it. And so there's 40 minutes of it. That's longer. That's longer than 2112 and Hemispheres are individually. So there's enough great music on there, I think, to justify it. Even if I turn off the player for the last two songs, like it's still a sufficient amount of Rush music for me.
Yeah, that's true. Oh man, maybe it goes higher for me too. Well, it's locked in, so
it's locked in. Can't change. So tell us about your number 8.
Yeah, so my number 8 is A Farewell to Kings.
This good sentiment, if I ever heard one.
Yes. Bye-bye, Kings. Get out of here.
Cut your strings, Kings.
Yeah, cut the strings, Kings. Yeah, so, for years and years, this was my all-time favorite Rush album. Like, without question, unbroken, number one. But that was many years ago. I was a young person, and I don't feel that way anymore. I still think it's a terrific album.
Now you're old.
Yeah, I'm old and begrudged, I guess. No. I still love this record. It's just I like other ones a lot better now. I think this is, especially based on the placement, I think this is the most consistent of the 70s Rush albums.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, the best one.
I would concur.
It's smoking. The band is coming hot off the heels of their breakthrough of 2112. They're inspired. They give the freedom to do what they want, and they really lean into the prog. This is maybe their proggiest album. Also, this and the next one, Hemispheres. Going track by track. The title track is a great song. I think it's better live, but it's still a great way to open this record. I love the acoustic intro. It's awesome. And you got Xanadu, which is an iconic song, man. Xanadu is beautiful.
Equally Kubla Khan influenced, and Citizen Kane, which is interesting.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's a classic Rush song. You can't get much better than Xanadu. That's like their 10-minute epic, quintessentially in a nutshell. Everything is great about that song.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get one of their biggest songs, Closer to the Heart, which I love. I think it's a well-deserved classic and big hit.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it doesn't get old for me. They play it a million times live, but it always sounds great.
Well, they always added to it.
Yeah, they build upon it, which is even better.
Especially like around the Presto tour. I think are some of the best versions of that song.
Oh, for sure. So side 2 used to be my favorite. Now I'm not so sure, but it has the 4th track, Cinderella Man, is one of my favorite Rush songs. I just love it to pieces. It's like Circumstances for me. It's like a lesser known of the 70s tunes, but it just smokes almost all the other ones. I love the lyrics. I love the opening riff. Cinderella Man's great. I also should say this album is very nostalgic for me because it was my favorite for so long. Like I have memories of listening, particularly on my Sony Discman, to this album like on repeat, and like driving around with my family going shopping and stuff, and just like hearing Cinderella Man and picturing like all the shopping malls and jazz that we were going to. Like, so it was a great time.
Subdivisions,
yes. Subdivisions of the heart, for sure. I think the only tune I'm not super keen on is Madrigal. I like it, but it's just okay. It doesn't really go anywhere too much. I like it. It sounds nice, but it's not really that memorable. But Sing This X1 is also a great 10-minute tune. I think it was a smart choice for this album too, to have 2 quote unquote mini epics than like one full blown blast of music.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes for much more concise and stronger music. For years, Cygnus X1 was my favorite Rush song. It's not anymore, but I still think it's terrific. I love all of the spacey effects. It really adds to the atmosphere of like, you really can picture him flying through space and then getting sucked into a black hole. That ending is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Still, Geddy's wailing scream works so well for this.
And those dissonant kind of unresolved chords that do reappear in book 2, by the way. I never picked up on that before, but that motif reappears in book 2. When I listened to this, I noticed how that ending is so ambiguous. It's like a big question mark, and I thought, oh, this is Rod Serling. This is the Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone. Yeah, I love it. It's just really good storytelling. Like they've really gotten a good handle on telling a story with these albums. And like with Xanadu also, you can get the picture of them going to see the river raft and walk the caves of ice into paradise. It's terrific. It's just terrific Rush music. What more can you ask for?
This is my number 6. This is my favorite album, Rush album of the 70s too. I kind of think it stands head and shoulders above the rest because it's a little less hard rock heavy metal. It's still there, especially Cygnus X1, which is kind of like the Necromancer a little bit. It's like the better version of the Necromancer for me. But this definitely has the prog sophistication beginning to take hold. And I think that Rush, that sophistication of Rush is something that would continue to grow. And they would get more complex, more sophisticated throughout the 80s and better part of the 90s as well. But yeah, for me, Xanadu is the all-time classic on this album. It's the cinematic Rush that started way back on By Tor and the Snow Dog, where you can just close your eyes and there's a movie in your mind. This is the first of the albums that they recorded at Rockfield. It's rural. It's like off the beaten path, and they can just kind of go out and there's the beautiful lake and the trees, and they can hear the birds when they go to record, and the sheep. They're in isolation. They're cut off. They're in the countryside, and it's just a beautiful backdrop, picturesque backdrop for creativity. Also, the new Opeth album was recorded there.
Yes,
the last
it was.
Will and Testament.
Which is amazing.
If you watch that documentary that's included with that album, and it is amazing, look for my review on this channel because I did talk about it. You can get an idea of where Rush recorded this album if you watch that documentary. But you can hear this in the opening moments of the record where Alex has a microphone set up and he's walking back and forth playing that acoustic guitar opening, and you can hear the birds kind of in the background because they actually recorded that on the lake. And you can also hear it in the trees as well on Hemispheres, because Hemispheres was recorded at that same studio. But yeah, Closer to the Heart, this is one of those songs that's a classic for a reason. And when they, there's that moment where you hear the tubular bells come in, and that I just love that because that was all about pulling it off live because Alex had to switch from acoustic to electric. So they put that little moment in there, but it's like the most iconic moment. It's like the most memorable thing in the whole song to me. But it just all kind of builds into this big solo, and you can really hear, I think, Rush coming into their own. We are comfortable, we are confident, we've had success. Now look at what we're going to do with it. Like you, I also adore Cinderella Man. I think Circumstances is a little bit better, but I do love this song. Madrigal is the only weak spot. It's a little naive, and I think that it's the kind of song that they would really perfect in about 2 records. With a song called Different Strings. That's where Madrigal is heading. And I think that song is a little masterpiece, by the way, but we'll talk about that in a little while. But yeah, again, Cygnus X1 is, again, the return of the cinematic storytelling side of the band that I love so much. And it's heavy. It's the most intense thing on the record by far. But yeah, this is a great album. And just us talking about it here today, I think I want to go put it on when we're done here because it's been like about a week and a half.
I was thinking about it
since
too.
the last time I heard it. And this is just, you can't go wrong with this album.
Yeah, it sounds great. Also,
it also sounds great.
Yeah.
Terry Brown was the right choice for that band, and he really steered them well, I think, in that first decade.
Oh yeah, 100%. Just a crop of great sounding albums.
Yeah, and I guess this is a moment for a Terry Brown appreciation, but I read an interview with him in the Clockwork Angels edition of Classic Rock Magazine, which when it came out in 2012 included a copy of the album with it, and I was given that by the publisher because I wrote them and complained that they didn't cover Nearfest, and so they sent me a copy of the magazine to shut me up. And I still have this thing, and I read through it in preparation. And there is an album by album feature where they interviewed both Terry Brown and Peter Collins. And Terry Brown says that the reason why he loved working with Rush is that he always felt that rock music could have meaning. And he wanted to make rock music that had meaning and substance to it. So he was absolutely the perfect producer for them.
Amazing.
For the first 10 years or so.
Yeah, that's amazing. We love it.
Good segue because we're about to talk about the one where they didn't work with Terry Brown.
Yes. My number 7 album, ladies and gentlemen, is Grace Under Pressure from 1984.
And mine, by the way, is Counterparts. My number 7 is Counterparts. I actually had I have Grace Under Pressure at number 4. So
nice.
I obviously think quite a lot of this record. But tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, so do I. This is like, we're at the point now where every album is just amazing. Truthfully, like this is the part of the ranking where it's like, man, this is so hard to rank because all of these albums are great. And like we've alluded, this album was produced with Rush and Peter Henderson, not Terry Brown. This is, I think, the first one without Terry, right?
And there's some drama with that, but we'll get to it.
But yeah, this album is awesome. It's really dark. Also, this is maybe one of their darkest albums, and it's great for that. They totally, at this point, lean into the synthesizer sounds, and I think it works really great and adds a lot of sound palettes and texture to their songs. I think this is also, continuing from the last couple records. Their songwriting is really firing off. Like from a songwriter's perspective, it is an amazing batch of songs. There really isn't a weak one in the bunch. I think maybe the Body Electric and Red Lenses are less good, but they're still really enjoyable songs.
I adore them.
Yeah,
I adore both of them.
The Body Electric chorus is so much fun with the binary.
Yeah, they played that on Clockwork Angels tour when I saw them, and they dropped it after like a month or so. So my head exploded. It was like David Cronenberg's Scanners when they played that. It was just like, oh my god,
that's incredible.
Play the Body Electric.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the Distant Early Warning is one of those classic Rush songs. Also, it's a kick butt opening song too.
You need someone to talk to and someone to sweep the floors.
Yeah. Incomplete. Yeah, it's great. It sets the tone for this record so well too. And I think there's two really special deep cuts on this album. They are Between the Wheels and Kid Gloves. Kid Gloves is a top 5 Rush song for me. I just absolutely love this song. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is about it, but the opening riff, the lyrics, it's just, for me, it's got it all. It's got an amazing Alex Lifeson guitar solo in it too. If you guys couldn't tell, I'm a big fan of his soloing. He's a tremendous soloist, and he writes out all of his solos, and they're something special. Yeah. I'm pretty sure he writes out the solos and doesn't just improvise them on spot. Which is really interesting approach. I don't know anybody else who really does that.
They did a tour in between Signals and Grace Under Pressure because I think they took some time off. Remember, Signals was 82. Yeah. And this was 84. So they did a little warm up tour prior to recording this album. And I can't remember which exactly songs that they played off of this, but Red Sector A was one of the songs that they played. And I just listened to it the other day, just kind of when I was waking up. And Alex's solo was completely different.
Oh wow!
Like it was more unhinged. It was interesting to hear because obviously the version that we get on the album seems very constructed to me.
Yeah, it's composed, which is neat. That's cool. I gotta check that out. I also love another live cut that really comes alive from this album is "The Enemy Within."
Mm-hmm.
That song's amazing. It's another one of those like amp up Rush songs.
And it looks like we may do the Fear trilogy in order because this is part 3. Although we did part 4 way back on Vapor Trails.
It does go in order. Spoiler alert for some people. But
we'll get there.
Yeah, well, it goes in order here because you don't. Like, Freeze is the 4th part, and it doesn't go in order. But Enemy Within is part 1.
That's right. Yeah. Enemy Within is part 1.
It was released last of the original 3, but it's the part 1,
right?
And then part 2 is The Weapon, and part 3 is Witch Hunt. It's kind of, I think it's a neat idea to release, or maybe I don't know what order they were actually written, but it's interesting to me to release a suite like that and have the parts come out and be recorded in order backwards.
I don't know if somebody told me this or if I read this, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think I read or heard that the Fear trilogy was presented as here's, Neil gave Geddy 3 sets of lyrics and okay, here's part 1 of Fear, here's part 2, here's part 3. And they just adapted them in reverse order. So they did Witch Hunt on the Moving Pictures album. But I think that those lyrics all were written back in like 81 or so.
Wow,
but I could be completely wrong about that, and I'm sure somebody in the comments is. If I'm wrong, they're tearing their hair out right now, and they are just chomping at the bit to tell me. And please do, but please be respectful because don't hurt our feelings.
Yeah, we're millennials. We're sensitive here.
We're trying.
We're trying, exactly. Yeah, we're trying our best here. But yeah, this is such a great album, and this is in like a stretch of such an amazing run of albums, like from 2112 to Counterparts to me is like holy crap, what a stretch of records, especially
Mm-hmm.
Permanent Waves to that point for me is like just magic.
Yes.
Constantly magic. There's always, like, this album too exemplifies, like, there's always new things to discover. There's a ton of surprises on this record. It's very diverse. You know, it's a really powerful album to listen to.
I love every song on this album, and like Red Sector A, when I saw that one played live on Clockwork Angels tour, and knowing what it's about too, it just, I found it such an emotionally moving experience. And I remember reading in Geddy's book where he talked about his lighting director, knowing what colored lights would elicit such emotions from humans. He employed that knowledge in the choices of lighting for Rush's shows over the years. And I can attest that there's truth to that, because oh boy, was there a feeling with this song, seeing it live on that tour. I also am a big fan of Between the Wheels. And I think that aside from maybe Vital Signs, this might be my favorite Rush closer. We aren't ranking the Rush closers, but this song is a piece of work. But what I was going to mention about this album that I think is interesting is that this is the first Rush album not to be produced by Terry Brown. And there was a lot of reasons for that. The story that I've read is that Terry Brown didn't like the direction that Rush were heading in, and he felt that they weren't Rush anymore. He felt that they were losing their identity, doing all this reggae stuff and all these, adding more keyboards and getting away from hard rock. And so they just kind of decided that, well, hey, maybe we should, see other people kind of thing. And so there was a lot of people that they approached to produce Grace Under Pressure, including Steve Lillywhite, who apparently ghosted them. And like within 2 weeks of he was supposed to produce them. Now, Steve Lillywhite worked on English Settlement. And I if I'm not mistaken, I think also Drums and Wires and Black Sea.
I think so.
Like he produced U2, I think, later on. I could be wrong about that, but he's a very famous producer, but he basically bailed on Rush to produce Simple Minds. And that's a grudge that Geddy holds to this day. Like, he hates him for that. and he does not mince words. Man, when Geddy doesn't like somebody, he lets you know. But he called him unprofessional and all this stuff. But Peter Henderson ended up not being a great producer for the band. And the main reason for this is that he was indecisive. And they just produced millions of versions of the songs. Okay, maybe not millions, but there was just mix after mix after mix of just small variations, and it drove Geddy nuts. And it ended up being that the band more or less produced this album themselves. And I feel like this album is a bit of a step back in terms of production as a result. It doesn't quite sound as good as Signals, or for that matter, it doesn't sound as good as Power Windows, in my opinion. But it still is a great, heavy, dark Rush album that, you do feel like the presence of the hard rock guitars are back here, where they've been missing from the Signals album. And it does feel more like Rush as an identity. So I really love this record. It's a complicated record. It's a dark record, but it's one of my favorites of theirs. And I always forget how much I love it until I put it on again.
Yeah. Me too. It's so great. Also has a tremendous title. Grace Under Pressure is a great album title.
And maybe I love the graphic. I love the graphic.
Yeah, so do I.
And this cover is one of those that's absolutely wasted on the CD era. You have to see this on vinyl.
It pops.
And it doesn't look to me like an album from 1984. It looks like it's from 2004. It's so modern looking. And I do believe this is Hugh Syme again.
It is Hugh Syme again. Yeah, I just looked.
The Grace Under Pressure title is that title came from the Difficult Sessions.
Yeah.
And the difficulties with the producer and getting this album made. And to this day, Rush have said that this album Hemispheres and Vapor Trails are like the hardest ones that they ever made.
Wow. That was the other thing I wanted to mention was After Image, and what a terrific song it is.
One of the first songs that Rush wrote, if not only songs that they wrote dealing with death. Robbie Wellen was the assistant engineer for Rush on a handful of their albums, and he would ski with Neil. Neil loved to ski. And when he passed away young. And that line about the shouts through the woods, the snowy woods or whatever it is, that's what that comes from. So it's a very emotionally resonant song.
Yeah, and the opening lyric is so beautiful. Suddenly you were gone from all the lives you left your mark upon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, it just hits home, man. If anyone's ever dealt with grief, it just hits home. And there's another great guitar solo in that song too. Yet another Alex Lifeson
as I mentioned.
Yes.
That's right. So we are at number 6, and I believe I already stated that Farewell to Kings was my number 6.
Yes.
Tell us about your number 6, Mikey.
Sure. So my number 6 is Presto. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Ian has the super amazing version of Presto, the SACD High Fidelity edition.
Audio
fidelity. Excuse me. It is high fidelity, audio fidelity, right?
Audio fidelity. Yep. High Fidelity is a film with John
Cusack.
Yes,
you're right.
If you could wave your magic wand, would you make everything all right?
I sure hope so. I'd make everybody free, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
So Presto is an album that I have very fond memories of getting. It was one of the maybe first 6 or 7 Rush albums that I got. I bought this one myself when I was early high school. And I was on vacation with my family, and it has like a nostalgic quality for me a little bit too because of the vacation. But also, I always loved this record. I think a genuinely terrific album. This coming off the heels of Hold Your Fire. So I think the songwriting caliber carries over into this album. This is just a batch of amazingly written songs. I think maybe the only one that's kind of forgettable for me is Anagram, which is a song that also I think interestingly points, this time listening to it, it points to Roll the Bones quite a bit, I think. It's just kind of not as memorable as the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
But man, the other songs are so great. And again, Neil is writing some of the best lyrics of their whole career on this album in particular. Like lyrically, like especially Red Tide and The Paths are probably 2 of the best lyrics of the whole thing. The Pass is a top 5 Rush song for me also. I find it so startlingly beautiful and also like very personal for me as well for a lot of reasons. It's just great. And it's got the opening 1-2 punch of Show Don't Tell and Chain Lightning.
Oh yeah. Chain Lightning is the favorite.
I love Chain Lightning.
A favorite of mine. And then The Pass and Warpaint, it's like the whole like first half of the album is just
Presto,
phenomenal.
Superconductor. I also think Available Light is my favorite Rush closing song.
It's a good one.
Another one I find really beautiful.
It's Pete Getty vocally too.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. And Getty's singing on that is maybe the best in the whole thing. Amazing singing. I love the lyrics in this album have motifs also of light and showing. And the Available Light is about like sunrise and sunset.
Interesting.
And there's the lyric, the promise offered in the East is broken in the West. I just knocks me out every time I hear that. God, this album rules, guys.
It does. It's a great album.
Listen to this album. I think it's a much maligned album for some reason, or it's just kind of forgotten. And this is why I think it's the most underrated record in the catalog. I even like the rabbit cover. It's kind of weird, but it fits. Yeah, look at those rabbits.
and they were a feature of the stage show at the time too. Like Pink Floyd had their inflatable pig and the inflatable family and all that stuff. So they had inflatable rabbits. And of course they would always run out of air, so by the end of the show your rabbits would be
so funny.
They had a motif where they shot one of the rabbits. Like there was a cartoon and there was like a good bunny and a bad bunny, and the bad bunny shot the good bunny, and that was like the end of the bunnies. They decided that they had enough of the bunnies. They were hanging around for too long. And this is one of those instances where it was something that the band thought was hilarious, but the audience response was like, "Oh my God, you killed the bunny." can't kill the bunny.
Yeah, that. Oh my gosh, the people are a little sensitive, I think. So you got to be careful with that kind of thing. If you know what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean that also like maybe one of their best tours as well.
It is.
The band is on fire.
It's one of my favorite tours, and there's a clip. Stick Hits has a great YouTube channel where he's restoring classic Rush clips, which is all of them, in my opinion. All of them are classic now. But he did a nice little upgrade on some Presto material, and it's fantastic. A song like Scars really comes to life in the live setting, and that's one of those songs I wish that they had played more of. Maybe a reason why this album is so underrated is that the band themselves undervalue it.
Yeah.
And they kind of say that it's a warm-up to Roll the Bones, but I feel like Roll the Bones was like a B-grade version of this.
Yeah,
like I find this album a lot stronger. And, maybe it's something to do with Rupert Hines' production. It's very different than Peter Collins, or for that matter, it's very different than Terry Brown. But this is Rush beginning to strip back a little bit for the first time in a long time. And they're kind of underproducing themselves. The keyboards are more textural. They're less, they're less up in front in terms of mix and the writing. But there is a little bit of like 1989 production itis here where the reverb is a little heavy handed. Maybe the bottom end isn't what it could be. But I do think that this is, for what it is, it's a very good album, and texturally it's very interesting. Like some of the sounds that Alex Lifeson is using on guitar, especially songs like Hand Over Fist, it has some really interesting guitar tones on it. But I think The Pass is the all-time classic from this album, very easily. It's kind of like an after-school special, but it's a very meaningful topic to me as well. I was just so impressed by Warpaint. Earlier I think I made the comment about the song that goes, "The boys and girls together paint the mirror black." Like I just think that is such an epic little song.
It is.
So many like little changes and subtle things going on in it. Presto, the title track, that's a song they broke out on the Time Machine tour.
I loved hearing that live. That was
worked
awesome.
So well. Yeah, I wish I could have seen that tour. That's probably my favorite.
Great.
They hit another peak there, I think. Superconductor's a great riff. Anagram for Mongo, it may be a great Blazing Saddles reference, but that isn't enough to make it a great song for me. Although the chorus is memorable, so it's like a kind of a mediocre song with a great chorus. The kind of second or third classic from this album is Red Tide, and I really wish that they would have played that live more often.
I know. I
also absolutely adore Available Light as much as you do, although I don't know if it's quite my favorite Rush closer. There's some pretty stiff competition like between the likes of Vital Signs and La Via Strangiato, but it's pretty sweet.
For me, I don't know. It's emotional. For me, it's emotionally resonant. It's a personal choice, but man, it's so great. That's the one for me. What position is this album for you in your ranking?
It is. I think it's quite a bit lower. It's at 13 for me.
This is the one that's not in your top 10, and it is mine.
Yeah, but I gave this a listen last night, and I love it. Like it may be low on my list, but I do think it's a great Rush record. But then again, I think Clockwork Angels is a great Rush record, and it's right above this on my list. So I don't know. I totally respect your choice at having this so high.
Yeah, this used to be in my top 5, but it got knocked out by something else we'll get to very soon.
Oh, and that's a good segue, isn't it?
Yeah.